Welcome to That's Joy, the podcast. I'm your host, Cece Calbanero, and I'll be sharing stories of miracles, God moments, and unpacking the truth behind what joy truly means. My friend, when God gives you a direct call on your life, be sure to answer it. Here's to answering my call together. Happy Monday. That's Joy fam. I am so happy that you are plugging in today because we have a special guest in the house. But if you're new around here, you might not know. My name is Cece and this is That's Joy. Welcome. I'm so happy that you found and stumbled across this podcast. Man, we love kicking off every episode with a little joyful noise. And by the way, you could submit your own joyful noise to me via text whenever it comes across your world. And I would love to hear about the good things that are happening in your life. But joyful noise is exactly that. It's what are the good things that are happening? Let's highlight way more of that. So I believe that when this episode drops, y'all, drum roll, please. Pumpkin spice is back. I know you were not expecting that, but truth be told, I am pretty basic to my core, and I have been looking forward to pumpkin spice season for a handful of weeks now. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where it is hot and humid, and while I do enjoy the summer months so much, I truly enjoy every season so much. There is something special about the fall that really tugs on your girl's heartstrings in a way that no other season does. So as we look forward to these next couple weeks and months, man, I just pray that we are so present where our feet are and that we could soak in every moment, because as we know, the fall goes by just so swiftly and quickly. And so I just want us to be that much more intentional. And if you love pumpkin spice, then go grab a cup. Sources be told that it drops August 26th. So by the time this episode is out, it should be out. Anyhow, today we are bringing on a very special guest who I feel very honored and privileged to share with y'all. She is an author, she's a speaker, she's a pastor, she's a mama and a wife, and I actually stumbled across one of her videos, I believe on my Explore page, which is crazy, and she was highlighted on Better Together TV. So this woman is making absolute waves for the kingdom, and honestly, I am still shook and so grateful that she said yes to being on That's Joy. So friends, let's open up our hearts, open up our minds, and welcome sweet Faith Eury to the podcast. All right, you guys, Faith is here. I am so excited to share this space with you, Faith. Fun fact, Faith and I have not yet met in person. So this is just the Lord doing his work and divine appointment after divine appointment leading to this moment. So for those of you and even myself, I am so eager to know, who is Faith and when and how did she find God?
Yes, I am so happy to be here. Such a pleasure. And how did I find God? Well, I was not born into a Christian home, but ever since I was about 6 years old or so, there was just this cry for God in my heart. I never went to church. I had never heard about Jesus. But I remember praying every night, God, if you're out there, I just want to get to know you. And what ended up happening was my family and we went to a vacation. And I was sitting in the hotel room as my parents were packing. And I remember watching a gospel film. And I remember asking my mother, who is that man? And she said, that's Jesus. And my response to that was, he sounds like such a great man. Like he looks like such a nice man, right? It's so crazy because that day afterwards, our car flipped over twice in the Nevada desert. And there was just something that happened in the atmosphere, I feel, where I just figured out God's name. And I feel like the enemy got so mad that I figured out God's name. I remember after we healed, I went to the library and I asked the librarian, "Do you have any books on Jesus?" And she looked at me
Wow.
like, "Oh my goodness, this child is asking me for books on Jesus." And she was like, "You have to go to church." And so naturally, I asked my mother to just drop me off at church. And it was just like a journey from there, is just the me just going closer to God and God coming closer to me, going closer to God, God coming closer to me, as was the promise in James 4:8. And so I was saved when I was 16 years old. And I started preaching when I was 19. And just step by step, following the lead of his presence, I am here where I am today.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is incredible. I love hearing people's stories of how God has just come into their lives. How old were you when you went into the library and had that moment?
I was around 6 years old.
6 years old? That is so
Yeah.
sweet. I'm, like,
I
thinking
know.
about my nephews, and at 6 years old,
Yeah.
they were not doing that. It
It's
was
wild.
amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's funny because I immigrated to the US when I was around 3 to 4. I believe it was
Okay.
four-ish. Honestly, it's like fuzzy at this point. But I believe it was around 4. And so even at that point when I was 6, I mean, my English was still broken. But there was just something about that longing for God that we were just created with,
Yeah,
and it just expresses itself differently with every person, right? Like I have
totally.
friends that are not believers and they try to reach the universe through the moon or through crystals or through vibes and, rituals, right? I think we were all born with this longing. And it's
Yeah.
what we do with that longing during our time on earth that determines so much.
Come on, we're going
Yeah.
there. We are that
Yeah.
yep, this is the episode where we're gonna go there. Wait, where did you immigrate from exactly?
From South Korea,
Okay.
and I moved to California.
What part of California?
At that point, my first stop was Anaheim.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
resonate a lot because my parents were the ones in the generation that did that same thing from the
Mhm.
Philippines. They moved when
Mm.
they were about 18 years old to the Bay
Yeah.
Area. So
Yeah.
I just commend your parents and your
Yeah.
strength because that is not an easy thing to do. Um,
Right.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
now you are doing all the things. It's so cool to
Mhm.
see how God has taken you from that 6-year-old faith into who you are and who you like how you get to speak into the world today. You're a
Yeah.
pastor, a
Mhm.
speaker, an
Yeah.
author.
Mhm.
And I know that with given all of these different roles, it's not something where you're like, let me just go find a job on LinkedIn and do this. You
Right.
were clearly called to do these things. Will you share with us the God story behind like okay you said you started preaching at 19, is that right? How did
Yeah.
that start?
Yeah, I mean, I started preaching when I was 17, but then I started going into pastoral ministry at 19. I mean, honestly, there wasn't anything deep behind that. It was just once I was in, I was like, everything else was boring. I just couldn't get into it. I was a pre-law major with poli sci, but I just couldn't quite get into it. My passion was just I wanted to talk about Jesus. I wanted to live for Jesus. Anything related to Jesus, that's what I wanted to do. Now, I mean, one could do all those other things still for Jesus, but for me, it was just I knew what I was created to do. Now, I thought that was enough when I first started. I mean, I thought my passion and my faith was all I needed until I started getting into ministry and I realized, wow, it could get pretty complicated.
Mm,
Being a woman of color, being a young mom, being, not even just a pastor, but also a pastor's wife. And so I just went on this, I don't know, at this point, like an 18-year journey of just navigating all those seasons. And the only through line in all of it was just my friendship with Jesus. That was it. And
mm,
so when people ask me for the formula, like what's the formula to being a female preacher? What's the formula to being a CEO of a nonprofit? What's the formula to being an author? I would say there is no formula. Like you just walk with Jesus and he will lead you step by step. He's not going to give you a full blueprint. He's not
mm.
going to give you a 10-year plan. He's going to give you directions for the day, directions for the season, directions for that week. He is he's a lamp unto my feet. He's also a light unto my path, but he's also a lamp unto my feet. And
Yeah.
so step by step, I walked with him. I mean, even things like the Honor Summit, which is the nonprofit that I run for Asian American women. I mean, that's not because I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to start a nonprofit for Asian American women. It was a fruit of 6 months of prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, I this was after my fourth child. I was postpartum. I was exhausted. I mean, four little children under the age of, I don't even know, like 5
Oh
or
my
6.
goodness.
Yeah,
Bless
like
you guys. Wow.
it was just a lot, right? And
Yeah, that's a lot.
that plus full-time ministry plus finishing seminary, like it was just a lot. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I guess I'm just done. It makes no sense to do more things. But I felt the Lord leading me into a season of fasting and prayer. And I remember he never asked me to start a nonprofit organization. What he did after 6 months was I woke up one day and I felt the Lord say, start a women's conference. Which
Wow.
to which I was like, I don't even know if I like women's conferences, at that time, I just didn't see the vision. I didn't know, like, I don't understand what the point was gathering women with women and telling women you're great. Like, I just didn't understand why we would do that. But then, out of obedience to the Holy Spirit, I would do it. And I realized, wow, these are all Asian American women that came. Wow,
Wow.
there's something in that. There's a harvest ready for Asian American women. And so it was truly just a step-by-step thing. The same thing with our church plant, same thing with the book. It was just following his voice in every season of my life. And after about a couple years of doing that, you look back and you're like, wow, God, you had the big picture already in mind. And it's not my responsibility to think about the big picture. My
Mm.
responsibility is stewarding your voice each day.
That's really good. There's so much that you just shared that I'm like, "Oh, man, I wanna dive in." There's so much that I wanna know,
Yeah.
but specifically even speaking to the decision of you being pre-law, like, I just feel like there's a girl listening right now who's
Mm-hmm.
in that seat, and I've also, again, been there. I'm, like, resonating so heavily with you because I thought I was
Yeah.
gonna be an optometrist,
Yeah.
and that's just I was like, "Yep, medical field,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm gonna be doing." And
Right.
then it was in the middle of college, end of college, where I was
Mm-hmm.
about to have a degree in this thing that I didn't
Yeah.
even wanna do anymore, where I was like,
Right.
"God, I know you're not calling me to this, and it's something I
Yeah.
can't shake." So I'd love to know just really briefly from you, like, I know it wasn't necessarily, like, a big moment, but could you
Mhm.
help the girl who's trying to discern that voice a little bit clearer,
Mm.
what it
Mhm.
looks like to let go of maybe what of something you expected or what your parents expected, and step into
Right.
what God literally said, "Come here, do this."
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is it could get rich. It could get
Come
rich.
on.
Yeah, because I remember those seasons when I wrestled with that because I mean, I had a very logical plan. I mean, I was already a Christian at that point and I was thinking yeah, make the bread. Like it's
Yep.
and do big things for the kingdom of God. It was very logical. And I just thought, yes, I'm going to become a lawyer and I'm going to run things from a place of power from my perspective. That was the extent to the vision though. Like it wasn't like, oh, I had a passion for the law. It was just, I was like, well, it's something I could do and it makes sense, and from this position I will make a dent for the kingdom of God. It's so interesting because oftentimes we make plans from a position of trying to make sure we're accruing power on our own,
Mm,
like position, money, status, and thinking, oh, that's what God wants from us. When actually, what the Lord wants from us is a yieldedness.
yeah.
And a willingness to trust. And I would say what it looked like for me, there was almost zero assurance. And I didn't get a clear voice saying, okay, now step away from your pre-law track and go into ministry. I didn't get that, to be honest. I actually wrestled with this deeply.
Mm,
Um, but I remember this one particular summer, the thing that pushed me over the ledge and got me into ministry was just simply, you know what? I'm just going to give God a chance. I
Mm.
don't know what it's going to look like. God never promised me, Faith, you're going to be running these ministries and you're going to be writing books. And like, God never promised me any of that. It's just simply, you know what? Whatever I choose, you will be with me.
Mm.
And I'm going to take this chance. I'm going to take a chance on you. And it's not hey, I'm going to throw myself at this and trusting that you'll make it successful. That's not it. It's to say that the faith walk is worth it with
Mm.
all its ups and downs. To say that your grace will catch me even when I get it wrong. And I
That's good.
trust you in that. You know, I trust you that even in the journey, it may not look like a straight line, especially for women. It does not look like a straight line. But even in that, even when I have waiting seasons, backward seasons, failure seasons, even when I do that, I'm going to take my chances on your grace instead of my plans. It says, in all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight.
Yeah.
It never said plan really well and he will make your
Come
path
on.
straight. It never said like try really hard and be perfect and he will make your path straight. It simply just said acknowledge him in all your ways and he will make your path straight. And that's what I did. That's what I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Wow. There's something so cool too about how God ends up using our yes. Like, I
Yeah.
think about who you are and how you show up. And I did a fair stalk on your Insta, of course, as you do. And I'm like, the way that you speak, there is a power and a fire behind you
Mhm.
speaking. And I think it is so cool that God would say, hey, I actually don't need
Mhm.
you in the area of law. What I need is that
Mhm.
fire in the church. I need that
Yeah.
fire in the Christian community to light them
Absolutely.
up, you know? You remind me so
Yeah.
much of my pastor, Pastor Alex Seeley. I go to the belonging and like you
Mhm.
have that same fire in you too. And
Mhm.
how God uses our yes friends is everything. I mean, now you've got a new book and let's
Yeah.
just talk about it for a second. It's called
Absolutely.
Experiencing Friendship with God, dropping
Yeah.
October 17th. All the deets are in
Mhm.
the show notes, y'all. So I'll share that down there. But I'd love
Mhm.
to hear from you. What's the heartbeat behind this book? And how did you know that God said, Faith, you need to write on this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this is just my life's message, really.
Mm,
Being all the way from that little girl who was just looking for God in the clouds, and having his voice lead me to where I'm at. I feel like the thing about today is Christianity sells a lot of things in today's world. There's a lot of perks to Christianity that even draws people towards the church. For example, they say, "Hey, if you're a Christian, then you get this community, you get this calling, you get to know your gifts, and you have this destiny." Right? He provides things. He does all these things, and we easily sell the works of his hands when actually the gift of the gospel is simply him, his
mm,
presence. And the reason why people deconstruct, leave the church, and get angry at the religion is because at the end of the day, as you go through the wilderness of life, all those things that are being sold to us are not worth it. It's
yeah.
really not, because that's not the point. The point of the gospel is our friendship with his presence. It's to know him intimately, authentically, and passionately. And when the purpose of your life is to know him in that way, to befriend his presence, then every season of your life will have deep value,
Mm,
even the wilderness. In your time of pain, you will know his comfort. In your time of failure, you will know his grace. In your time of weakness, you will know his power. And I did a deep dive into the study of the Israelites in the wilderness. And I was like, wait, why don't we live like this anymore? Like, why do we feel like we need Jesus plus other things? Like,
mm,
why, since when did we begin to believe that his presence was not enough? When you see 40 years of proof where the Israelites were led and fed by the presence of God. like just the presence of God.
Yeah.
It wasn't Moses, it was the presence of God that did it. And yet we live in a time where we're like, yeah, I will listen to podcasts, read books, talk to my pastor, and talk to other Christians, but never once talk to God himself. And
Wow.
we wonder why we feel so spiritually dry. And we wonder
Mm.
why our lives don't look like the book of Acts. It's because we've completely discounted the actual gift of the gospel, which is his presence. And that's
Wow.
why I wrote the book.
Come on, that is needed, and I couldn't agree
Mhm.
more with all of that. I think so much of what you're speaking to kind of segues into my next question of us just being a distracted generation. Like you
Yes.
said, there are a multitude of podcasts. You're plugging into one right
Mhm.
now, which like
Mhm.
thankful you're here, but also how often do we choose to
Right.
press play on this before we press play on the voice of God by
Yes.
himself, you know?
Yes.
And we
Mhm.
have Instagram and TikTok and all these updates of
Mm.
threads and reels, and it
Mhm.
goes on and on and on, you know? And
Yes.
then that's not even to say, thinking about streaming platforms, like I just had a
Mm.
second the other day where I was sitting here and I was like, every week they are literally dropping new episodes, new
Oh,
seasons
yeah.
on every single streaming platform,
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to fight for our
Right.
attention. And it's
Yes.
kind of nuts. We're like this,
Mhm.
like just bouncing around, looking at
Absolutely.
everything
Yeah.
except God sometimes. And
Mhm.
I've been in moments where I've definitely been distracted myself. So I'm just curious
Mhm.
to know for you, how do you personally remain undistracted? And what are
Mm.
some of the ways that you really tend to that relationship with God and that
Mhm.
friendship with God?
Yes, I love that question. Well, first, I so get distracted. Like
Great, we're not
all the
alone.
time. Yes, even I mean, I wrote the book on friendship with God, and I can tell you, I still go through seasons where I'm like, God, I'd rather watch this and I'd rather
Right.
scroll than pray. And the thing about it, though, and I think the difference between an immature Christian and a mature Christian is I don't allow the guilt and the pressure to keep me away.
Mm,
I just bounce right back. I don't waste time on dwelling on what I haven't done. I just run right back. Right. And if it's been, I mean, couple weeks ago, I took my kids on to a beach trip and I didn't open up my Bible for 4 days. And I didn't, and I remember after 4 days telling God, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And I feel bad. I mean, I'm a pastor, right?
right,
Shouldn't
right,
I?
right,
This is my
right.
profession. Like I should be doing this, right? And I felt bad for a second. And then I remember catching myself and thinking, I'm not going to discount your grace.
Mm,
I am not going to ignore it because you fought hard and you died to offer this grace to me. So I'm going to receive it and I'm going to praise you and I'm going to run right back. Right.
that's
And I
so
think the
good.
thing about distraction is we often get distracted because of our guilt with distraction, right?
Well,
Like
we get more distracted.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
we start playing this narrative like, oh, I shouldn't pray when I don't feel like it. Or like, I don't want to be fake with God. Any reason that keeps you from just going to God is a lie, even if it sounds or feels righteous to follow it.
Yeah.
Right. And so just going right back. And also knowing this. All right. Like, so speaking of platforms, all these platforms, you know, Netflix, Hulu, like TikTok, Instagram, it's like this fight of come to me. Come to Threads and not to Twitter. Come to me. Come to me. Like come to Netflix and not Hulu. It's always this clamoring of come to our platform. Come buy into our thing. Stream with us. Jesus, being God, is the only one that says, I went to you.
Mm,
I go
come
to
on.
you. I stay with you. So when it comes to struggling with your distraction, he's not saying run a million miles to get back to me. No, he says simply acknowledge me.
Mm,
You go to God not by running to God, striving to God, and doing all these things, flipping and turning for God. No, you simply acknowledge him because he never left. He's still with you. And the act of acknowledging him, shifting your attention It's so simple as just shifting your attention, acknowledging the one that has remained with you. That's how you fight distraction.
What you just said set somebody free because
Mm,
I think
mm,
that there are so many people, and honestly, this goes back to, like, us being on these platforms, us
yeah,
plugging into a certain show, and then what ends up happening? We're comparing a bit. I think
yeah.
about living here in Nashville. Nashville is such a Christian-centered community, and I am so grateful for that because everywhere you
Yeah.
go, y'all, I'm not kidding you. You go to any coffee shop, somebody has their Bible open. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
cool because I'm from the Bay Area in California.
Mhm.
You never see that in the Bay.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that we have that here. But what I
Mm,
also notice with that is that these kind Christians often talk about comparing themselves to the next Christian. Oh, she reads her
mm.
Bible every day. She hops on Instagram live every week and
Wow.
she does this and she does that and I don't do those things. So then therefore
Mm,
I'm not worthy of God's love
mm,
or God's attention and that is just a lie from the pit of hell, right?
mm,
Like, I love
mhm.
that you shared that you went to the beach, and guess what? You probably experienced God with your children in a way that you never have before. But
Yeah.
this mold of whatever,
Mhm,
Christians paint as far as what it looks like to lean in with God could have,
mhm.
I don't know, just like robbed us of that time that we actually
Yeah.
did have,
Right.
where it looked a little bit different, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that is just so good. I
Yes.
love that. I often hear too from people who write into that joy of a text community. And by the way,
Mhm,
y'all could text me at any time. The number's in the show notes, but I love hearing how episodes are moving you. There are a lot of people who will sometimes reach out in a way of saying, Cece, I feel a bit lost. You speak
mm,
so much to the wilderness in your
mhm,
content and in the book.
mm.
I'm sure you unpack that a bit too. But a lot of people find themselves in this quote unquote wilderness season, waiting on
Yeah,
God, waiting to hear
yeah,
from God, where they're not quite sure what to do.
yeah.
Curious to know because I feel like you've mastered it more than a lot. But what are like 3 tips? If you can give three
Right.
tips to someone who's navigating that season right
Yes,
now,
yes,
what would those 3 tips be?
yes. Number 1, I would say to really know your purpose.
Mm,
The purpose of the purpose of the wilderness was not the promised land. And when you focus on the promised land, and if that's your obsession, then you'll always feel like you're waiting. When actually the purpose of the wilderness was a friendship with the presence of God. What I think is interesting about the wilderness is that if you look at number 6, God gives this benediction that he told Moses, Aaron and his sons are supposed to give to the Israelites every day or on a regular basis basically, right? um and that blessing was the prayer that we know, the Lord keep you, his face shine upon you,
mm,
his light and his favor and all those things. I think it's very interesting because that blessing never mentions the promised land,
mm,
and that blessing was given onto the Israelites from the beginning of their wilderness journey, meaning they were never without the ultimate blessing. They weren't waiting, they
mm.
were already with the purpose. The purpose was that friendship with his presence. And I think so often in the wilderness, we feel like God's not doing something, that God is failing us or he's abandoned us simply because we live for that breakthrough. We live for that healing. We live for that provision. We live for the next job, the answered prayer, all the promised land feels. We live
Yeah.
for all those things when actually the purpose of our lives is to befriend the presence of God. And
Mm,
you will forever feel like you're waiting unless you could acknowledge that first. So, first, I would say to really align yourself with your ultimate purpose, right?
yeah.
And 2, learn the simplicity of acknowledging him in all your ways. And this is not work. And I know what it feels like to feel extremely stuck in the wilderness. Like, hey, I don't even have the strength to open up my Bible. Like, I
Mm,
don't even have the strength to sing loudly to this song. That's okay. Acknowledge him when you're crying. Acknowledge him when you're angry. acknowledge him while you're on your long commute, while you are changing your child's diaper. Like, acknowledge him. And as you do, you will find that in the wilderness, there have been more miracles than ever in the promised land.
Come on.
You know, that was where manna was. That was where water from the rock was. That was where the pillar of fire, the pillar of smoke was. The miracle was just simply that God was with them, you
Mm,
know? And so, and we experience that increasingly as we learn to not be afraid to just acknowledge him, even at our worst. And I think sometimes we refrain ourselves from going to him in the wilderness because we're like, well, he's going to tell me to forgive and I'm not ready to forgive, you know, or
yeah.
I'm angry, I'm sad, I don't understand him, I don't know if this is faith. No, even in that, just acknowledge him.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge him. And number three, you know, just have other people pray for you.
Mm,
If you can't pray for yourself, just be like, hey, I just text somebody and be like, hey, I'm in this place and I'm stuck. I would
mm,
love your intercession. You know, I'm reminded of the paralytic. You know, he got to where he was, that place of healing, that place of faith, because other people had faith where he did not have faith. His
mm.
friends had faith for him. And so find somebody that could just pray for you in your season and help unlock the things that you yourself do not have the strength to unlock.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Y'all, those are like three applicable things that you
Mm,
can quite literally run with. And I love that you talk so much to the friendship with God,
mm,
because I think so often, especially like the younger generation, if we've never grown up in the church, or don't have that kind of influence around us, we can think of God, which he is mighty in all of his ways and incredible and big, and it kind of just is like beyond anything that you could ever think up. But then you painting the picture of a friendship with God and
mm,
how you just described like those 3 points. I just think about the closest people that you have in your life where you have a good friendship with those people. You're married,
yeah.
right? So even your husband, like a good
Mm-hmm.
friendship with your husband, with your spouse, with
Yeah.
your brother, with your mom,
Mm-hmm.
you don't ever sit in a waiting with them. You enjoy their
Mm-hmm.
presence now, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
about my best friends, and
Yeah.
I'm never like, "Oh, but next week we're gonna go to the dinner, and right now we're playing this awesome game, but next week's the dinner." I'm like, "No, no, we're playing this awesome game right now, and
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
here right now, and I am
Yeah.
thankful and grateful right now where my feet are." And I love that
Mm-hmm.
so much because we get to turn to God and view it in that same way, but even better. Like, even better, and that just makes my heart kind of overflow in a million ways, because that's all that he wants, is a
Mm-hmm.
friendship with us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those tips. So
Absolutely.
powerful. Okay, the final question that I
Yeah.
asked every guest on the show
Mm-hmm.
is, what does joy mean to you?
Mm. Joy to me is peace.
Mm,
You know, I think joy, I mean, there's like and it's so funny because I've been writing on this and I've been studying it. Joy in the Bible, like renditions of it, comes up over 400 times in the Bible. And it's
wow.
always in relation to God. It's never really without God. And it's always separate from like the hedonistic fleshly pleasures and the happiness that we feel from that. Um, and it's always in connection with God. So for me, joy is just having that perfect alignment with God and having peace in that, you know, and just living my best life in that, you know,
In that.
like truth be told, right? I know how to have fun too. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of my topics that I like write and talk about, they're so serious, but fam, like I know how to have a good time, but it's not a good time unless I am fully confident in my alignment with God. And
Mm,
when I'm not fully confident in that, that is when, even in the greatest earthly pleasures, I'm still struggling with depression or anxiety, you know, and those
oh,
are definitely things that I struggled with growing up. Right. But in my confidence in being fully aligned with God, where I was able to truly enjoy the joys of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. I love that. That
Mhm.
is joy, y'all. So, Faith, we have to know the book, the details. How can we
Mhm.
continue to show up for you? I know people are like, that fire?
Yeah.
I need more of that. Where can I find that? Will you just
Yeah.
share with us all the deets?
Yes. I mean, they could find me on Instagram at Faith Yuri Cho. Also, my website has all the links for my book, faithyuricho.com, and also shows like how to connect with me and, all the resources and things like that. My husband and I, we planted a church in Paramus, New Jersey, Mosaic Covenant Church, so they could find us there. And yeah, and I also run the Honor Summit, and you can find that on Instagram at the Honor Summit.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so, so much again for your time and your wisdom and sharing your heart with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, you guys. Who else is like, whoa, I am running to her Instagram and I am going to follow her. And I'm also going to grab this book because I have a feeling that it's going to change my life and allow me to really grow my relationship with God. I mean, that's so much of who Faith is. And something that she shared that I loved so much was this idea of acknowledging God in all of our ways. I think something that surprised me the most about what she shared was her going on vacation, being a pastor, and not opening up her Bible. Like, so many people would be like, oh my gosh, that is so blah, fill in the blank, right? On whatever opinions that might be an assumption there. But I think what is just so profound about what she shared was her honesty and vulnerability with how she seeks out a friendship with God and the things that help her as a pastor, as an author, as a mama, like all of these amazing titles, right? It just paints that visual of what it can look like. And man, I just loved our conversation so much. If there was a certain part of this episode that you love too, man, I'd love to know what that part was. You can shoot me a text to the number in the show notes, and I'm going to read that right now. It's 615-813-4813. And by the way, that's actually me who texts y'all back. So thank you in advance for taking the time to let me know, converse with me, share new podcast topics, all the things. Really, really grateful. If you're not following me yet on social, you can do that by following me at C Calbanero on Instagram and on TikTok, and you can follow That's Joy the podcast too. Friends, if you have not yet subscribed, rated, or left a review for That's Joy, oh man, it would mean the world if you took 2 minutes to go do that. It actually does wonders for podcasters all over, and I am so, so grateful for your time and your efforts in making that happen. I'll never leave an episode without saying, if you have even the smallest desire to meet the creator of the universe, or if you've already been saved but you aren't really free, I want to invite you to sit at the table of plenty with me and so many others. I'm telling you, there's an abundance here. There is an overflow here, and there's just so much joy here. I'm here to tell you that God's for you. All you have to do is invite him into your heart right now. He's waiting for you. He wants to meet with you. And friend, I'm so proud of you. If you just made this decision, I'd love to know you. Shoot me a text to that number in the show notes so I could pray for you. I love you. God loves you. And until next time, I'll chat with y'all next time. Thank you so, so much for being here.